Well, welcome. It's council preview time. I'm Tom Laux, Director of Communications for the City of Marshfield. I have our city administrator here sitting next to me, Steve Barg. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
Great to be with you, Tom.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the next council meeting. That is going to take place on November 9th. So you can join us at 6 o'clock in the council chambers or join us on one of our many platforms streaming to watch the council meeting from your home or mobile device, wherever you are. We have that availability now. All right, well, I'm going to switch over to Steve, and you're going to talk about the next thing here on the agenda, which is in our consent agenda, and you can explain about that.
Yeah, this comes to us from the Board of Public Works, who discussed this a little bit ago, and it's involving a plan that we need to develop for future wastewater needs. You know, a lot of times people don't think about wastewater. You know, we use the sewer system, and we get a bill for those services, but we don't really ponder a lot what's going on with that plant and how it's working. It's a very efficient plant, Tom. It's been run very well by Sam Warp currently, and with his great staff and people before him who were on board, Ron Dickrell and others. But now we're at the point where the plant is, you know, a couple decades old, and we need to start looking at what's going to happen for the next phase. Does it need to be expanded? Does it need to be replaced? What about the equipment needs and those kind of things? So we are looking at working with a consulting firm that knows these kind of things to try and develop a long-term plan for the future of the wastewater plant. Got two proposals on that, one from MSA Professional Services and one from Strand Associates. And we've worked with Strand before. They're an excellent company. In fact, they help us on the annual rate review to determine whether or not the sewer rate needs to be increased or whether it can remain where it is. So the proposal we're looking at taking is from Strand. The recommendation is to go with them for $84,865. The Board of Public Works was favorable, and we'll see if the council has any questions about that. But it will be important, Tom, for us to look ahead to the next phase, if you will, of our wastewater treatment.
All right, Steve, here, as you guys know, I'm double doing, so I might have a few glitches. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. You're doing a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, main thing is the information is put out here, and that's what we're working towards. Let me just talk a little bit about this, just so you can elaborate a little bit on our wastewater treatment plant. It's used more than our city. People bring in stuff, is that correct, or from the neighboring communities on trucks?
Yeah, we have private haulers come in and bring their septage, and we charge them, you know, a commensurate rate for what it costs us to handle that. So we do service outside of our community to some degree. And we have a lot of other challenges I really didn't mention before that we have to deal with that people never see, like phosphorus is a big one. The government levels above us mandate, you know, reducing the phosphorus level. We have a lot of other things we have to treat for and make sure that we're meeting all the federal and state requirements. And that includes the private stuff that we take in too. So we're very conscious about what we're accepting. But again, I can't say enough about Sam Warp and Mark Kibela, his assistant, and all the folks who work down there. They are first rate.
All right, well, we'll follow that process as things move on. The first has to go through consent, and after that, we'll work with SAIL a little bit on what's happening during that process. It won't happen overnight. So, all right, let's talk about another piece in consent, Steve. It's a big project, East 17th Street, something the engineering team is currently really working on. What's that about approval of final plan?
Well, you know, Tom, it seems like this project has been on the docket for a long time in our CIP, the improvement of East 17th Street over by the fairgrounds. It would be reconstructing that road from Peach to Maple, and, you know, needed for safety reasons and just good driving you know, reasons as well. We're finally getting it done, or planning to get it done next year. That'll be exciting as our biggest project. But there have been some things that we've had to look at in the final plan design, and one of them is working with the fairgrounds. They got a conditional use permit a few years ago, Tom, to do some work there, and as far as, you know, updating and improving their area. And part of it is really along 17th Street, the parking area that comes off of there, and some other things. So one of the items discussed by the Board of Public Works on Monday, November 1st was, is it possible that we can incorporate some of that work into the city's overall project? You know, why would we be doing something and at the same time they're supposed to be doing something on their portion, if you will? So we did look at that, and they did agree, the Board of Public Works did anyway, to add that to the project scope. And it will add another, I think, $95,000 or something of that nature, but it'll mean mean that we'll be bidding out everything that needs to be done in that area in one fell swoop. So we'll be seeing if the council has any concerns about that, or if they have any questions about the project itself, the funding, the details of it. Our engineering staff is rolling, and they're making plans that will be, like I said, a big project for us in the summer of 2022.
All right, this street is actually one of the busier streets within our community, so it's kind of looked at like we did with the main street out here by our old city hall.
Yeah, it's heavily used, and again, the fairgrounds property makes it even more important. The traffic through and from there during fair time, but just all year round, it's used by a lot of people. One of the east-west connectors in that area.
All right, Steve, let's talk about ambulance contracts. That's also in consent. What is that about?
Yeah, Tom, this came from the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee. It's an annual request that the city staff makes to the committee, and that is updating our rates that we charge. Now, some people might not know this or remember it, but a few years ago, we went to a contractor for our billing and collections on ambulance. It's a company called LifeQuest out of Watoma, Wisconsin, and we turn to them when we do the annual reviews to see how much we need to be charging for various ambulance services to keep up with the cost. The EMS or the ambulance is a separate enterprise fund of the city, so it's not part of the general fund. If we were to find that the ambulance service was not breaking even, and people, citizens might say, "Aha, we're paying our tax money for the ambulance operation." You're not. It does fluctuate with year to year, but it's covered by fees from people, so it's really like a business rather than like the normal government service that we provide for police and fire and public works and those kind of things. So anyway, looking at the last year, our accounting department, in talking with LifeQuest, came to the conclusion that we need to upgrade our fees by 5%. So, people think that we service just the city of Marshfield, but we serve, I believe it's 13 towns and a couple of townships as well, and villages with ambulance service. And so we need to make sure that they're paying their fair share. We're not subsidizing people in the rural areas and charging the city residents more for ambulance service. So 5% is the amount that we are charging on these municipalities. The committee was favorable toward that. We'll see if the council is as well. One of the council members, Tom Witzel, brought up, is that enough, 5%? Because we didn't have an increase last year due to COVID. But Jennifer Silinski, our accounting manager, indicated that the finance department believes that that's a reasonable amount and will cover our costs to make sure that we're not, again, subsidizing the operation with other funds.
All right, just so I understand on our viewers, this is a fee the town pays, not the individual. Is that correct? And those are different fees if the individual calls an ambulance?
Yeah,
I would think from one of these towns, that's a different fee, but you have a contracted fee to know that you have to come there and do service.
Correct. There's a lot of private ambulance services out there, Gold Cross and others, and they could contract with those companies to get their ambulance service for their towns or villages. But they find us to be a good deal. We're right here. Obviously, why would they want to look at other places if they felt that they were getting quality service at a decent price? So that's what it is, and I think they'll look at this favorably. Sometimes we get pushed back. They have their budgets, and they have their financial challenges too, but I think that they'll be supportive and realize that this is needed to keep up with rising costs.
All right, well, let's go to the next piece here, pay adjustment. City Forester, that was on our finance meeting last night. Let's talk a little bit about our City of Forester and the importance of that position.
Yeah, when we hired our first City Forester, Mark Briskevich, a couple of years ago, we really didn't know exactly how the position was going to play out. We did a job description, we sent it to our compensation consultant, McGrath, a company out of Northern Illinois, to put it in our pay scale. Where does it belong? Should we step 125, 128? What is a proper placement in our overall structure? And at that time, they recommended we went with pay scale 127. But then you see what happens after 2 years. What's he really doing? Is he doing everything that it says on the job description? Is he doing more? Is he doing less? And after 2 years' experience, it was brought to my attention that we need to look at revising the job description to reflect reality of what he's actually doing. And we sent that in to our compensation consultant. They recommended one step up to 128, and the committee was favorable to that. We'll see if the council agrees. Again, this is not trying to get away from our pay scale that we work so hard to adopt. top. It's really just saying, okay, now that we have some experience with this position, does it really fit what we expected it to be? And in this case, it looks like maybe a little bit more is involved than we first knew. So a slight adjustment looks to be warranted.
All right, well, we'll see the forester doing some work in Brayton Park this year. That's a big project because of EAB, that nothing you can do about that, but you have somebody in-house along with the Public Works or street crew to help with that. So down the road, you hope that's saving money than really hiring all that out. So maybe this is why we do that.
That's a great point, Tom. And that's what the public sector, city government has to go through all the time. We oftentimes start with paying consultants and contractors. And then there's a day where you say, maybe we'd be better off to have our own staff person rather than the expense that we incur with other companies. And I think that what Mark does is a good value for the city. He does a great job. And we're happy to continue to be more proactive in our forestry.
Well, cities changed on how they operate in your time as well in the last 25, 30 years. Right? As a city administrator, you see these new positions like myself that didn't exist 25 years ago. And same with, even a forester, it's a little bit different. So we have to look at that now differently and then still continue the ones we have. So it gets harder and harder. Yeah,
Emerald ash borer is a big thing, but even beyond that, he helps manage the downtown trees, the street trees, when we replace them. Diseased trees to identify them and deal with that. There's a whole lot that goes into the forestry management.
All right. Well, let's move on to another piece that just kind of came up. Our finance department. Jennifer Silinski was actually on camera yesterday. I think it might have been her second time. Yeah. She is our current main accountant. Is that right?
Yeah, accounting manager.
So what does she need going to be doing here now? What's the news?
Well, Ron Allman, our finance director, who we hired back in the late spring of 2018, is leaving us after 3 years. Got another job opportunity, and good people progress, and we wish him all the best. He's done some incredible things for us, especially helping us get through this problem with the TIF district issue with the funding for our budget and the structural budget issues we've dealt with. He's put us in a much better position in working with the council and me and others for our financial future. I can see maybe good days ahead when we get back to the bond rating we used to have and some other things. But he's moving on, and so we're looking at having an acting finance director until we can hire somebody full-time to be the new finance director. Jennifer Sileski came to us in September of this year, so she's only been around for about 2 months. Came from Colorado, but she has roots back in Wisconsin from her younger days. And so she has agreed that she'd be willing to accept the job of the acting finance director for, we don't know how long, maybe 2, 3, even 4 months as we do a search, but we'll see if the council's willing to appoint her. Certainly the council's just getting to know her, and we all are really, but she's got a lot going for her. She seems like a really intelligent and skilled person, and so we look forward to working with her in the future.
All right, so you mentioned appoint. Is that different than normal process? Is that because of it's a director department level head by the council versus just a little bit different? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The department and division head thing is treated a little bit differently, and the council does ultimately have the appointment. We replace staff people a lot as they go on to various jobs, and we don't always have to bring them forward to council for appointment. But in this case, at this level, even as an acting position, we definitely want to get the council's blessing on her new role.
Well, Steve, it's a big position, and I'm sure Jen has got more work than she needs at this point. But what do you do? It's not like I just said a few minutes ago, jobs are out there. It's not the same as it used to be. People staying in a job for 30 years.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough.
The whole 35 years and get the gold watch and all that kind of thing. Yeah, you don't see that a lot. And again, like I said a minute ago, Tom, good people, they look for opportunities, they move on. Sometimes it's for, what they believe are better for their professional growth. Other times it's because, family, or they want to move to a different town or whatever it is. But in this case, the 3.5 years that Ron put in, I'll say it one more time, it's amazing what he accomplished, and we'll miss him, we will. But we'll look forward to Jennifer taking the lead role for the time being, and then we'll see where it goes after that.
All right, let's move on down to the items that are on the agenda that have recommended action. This is a big deal. Sculpture Park, that is currently available right now privately. It's when the person decides to retire. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But what is this about in Wildwood Park?
Well, Tom, Clyde and Nancy Winnia have long time been the ones who have owned and run the Jurassic Park just north of town. What a fun and amazing amenity. I think you and I have talked about this before. So many tourists come out to see it. I've seen estimates of the impact of the value in terms of revenue to this area that's brought by people coming to see that park. It's pretty big. So Clyde is kind of winding down his operation a little bit at this point in his life, and he would like to donate some pieces of his collection to the city of Marshfield for prominent display. I mean, he'd like to have people be able to see it, and that's a good thing. And the idea is to do it in the area of Wildwood Park. Well, that's going to be on city property, and so it requires approval, and it also requires a lot of planning and effort. And there's a group that's been working on this, Tom, for a while, a lot longer than I know, a couple of years, and they have ideas, and they want to spend some money now on a design for it. They are pulling together resources for that, but they need the city's blessing before they can move forward. So Mark Nelson did a great job of presenting that the other night, sharing what it might be like and how it would benefit the city. And the council, as they often do on the first time through, they don't vote. They just ask questions, and now they'll vote. But the feedback that Mark did that night was very positive. A couple of council members in particular were saying that they were so glad to see this idea coming to pass. So some of Clyde's artwork could be featured. So now they'll be asked to vote on it, and if they say yes, then that will send the group on their way to finish up their fundraising, get a design consultant in place, come up with a design that they'll bring back to the council. They want to keep the city involved, but hopefully to bring a lot of Clyde's statues to, I got to quit saying statues, I've said that before, a lot of Clyde's sculptures to the city of Marshfield.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat place. Had a chance to go out there. I'm sure our former MCTV and some of the producers have done stuff out there. I know it's been on the channel before. I watched it before I even arrived. Been there a couple times. Pretty neat operation.
Yeah.
So we can get some of that stuff. Probably not all of it, because that's a lot. A lot of stuff accumulated over the years of some pretty neat stuff. So, all right, well, we'll look forward to that. Is the presenter coming back?
I don't think Mark might be in the audience, but he's not being requested to speak again. But he may be there for questions.
All right, well, we'll find out what that's about. Let me move on to the next thing here. I'm moving ahead too fast, ain't I?
The finances, right?
This has to do with our budget adjustments. Something from Ron is going to be presenting.
Yeah, and Ron will be presenting. That'll be the last time he presents to the council, and he'll be walking through an idea that he came upon when he talked to our financial consultant, Ehlers, and also the auditor, CLA, verifying that it was all good. But there's a thing called expenditure restraint program. Tom, I think we've talked about it before. It's an incentive by the state of Wisconsin that if you stay within certain spending parameters every year, you qualify for a big payment from a pie the next year. So if you stay within, let's say it's 3.5% as a target in some year, you stay with your expenses being no more than that, then the year after that, looking out farther, you'll get a piece of a big pie, which for us has been around $400,000. So we want to qualify for that. That's important. We don't want to miss that target. But Ron has come across the idea that, if we don't get close to the maximum we could have out there for supposedly spending, and in a year, then the next year, we have less room to work to qualify. So what he learned is that if we can, increase our contingency amount, the amount we set aside for rainy day, if you will, something bad that might happen in 2022, then we can do that. It won't affect the tax rate, it won't affect anything the citizens see, but it will give us a better starting point when we try to qualify for the next year's expenditure restraint program, because it will look as though we had higher expenses than we really did. And that might sound like, phony accounting to people watching us right now, but it's not. It's allowable. It's something that our financial advisor says is done in many other communities. In fact, a lot of communities do this regularly. And so it won't change anything that the public expects. We're still looking at 2.5% increase in the tax rate, which we hope to find reasonable. But this will give us a little bit more fudge room as we look ahead to qualifying for this pot of money in future years.
All right. I'm kind of curious, Stephen, maybe some people are, this is just the general fund expenses. So something like wastewater, franchise fees like what I do here, that isn't in the expenditure restraint area, correct?
Correct. Only general fund. The general fund is about $23 million, and there's another whole thing that you're talking about with communications, wastewater, EMS. That's another 25,000, but that's $25 million. I think I said 1,000 both times. Yeah. It'd be nice if our budget was only 23,000. It's 23 million for the general fund and closer to 50 million overall. But you're right, that's outside of that realm.
Can't cities just make funds instead of general fund?
Well, I know that the federal government prints money. I don't think if we printed money with, Nick's picture on it, that a lot of businesses would accept that. So the answer is no.
Now I can see why some cities don't put certain funds into the general fund.
Yeah, that's where
they don't need to.
Right, and that's where the tax rate is determined. And one of the great things that Ron did in his time here, Tom, is he figured out that, and this is very valid accounting, that some of our staff do things to support wastewater. So, for example, Dan Kinnick, our public works director, Tom Turchi, our city engineer, they spend a fair amount of their time working with Sam Warp and others down at wastewater. Well, we realize that we ought to be charging a portion of their time to wastewater. Well, that helps reduce the general fund, keeps the taxes lower. And again, it's not a trick, it's a very appropriate allocation of costs.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. I would do that, and everybody here would like to have lower taxes. Yeah, including you and me.
Yeah.
So.
And it's reasonable. It's a reasonable thing to charge those enterprise funds.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the piece that I mentioned here. Going to find here strategic plan. You've been working hard on that as well as staff, but it's been in your plate for a couple weeks now. What's that about?
Yeah, it has, and maybe our regular viewers will remember us talking about this back in the middle of September. I presented this to the council in September 14th, the plan that staff had worked on to look at the next 3 years, 2022 through 2024. What do we need to do? What are the most important goals and objectives, and getting those laid out so we can track, follow, keep up on them, keep ourselves accountable. Well, the council liked it in general, but they had a few questions. The biggest one, Tom, and you really did a great job on this, was we need some public opportunity to give input and feedback. So Tom did an excellent job of getting it out there on our various platforms, website, Facebook, whatever, looking for public input. We didn't get a lot. We got a couple of very thoughtful emails that we are incorporating, to some degree into the plan, and that was good. That was a really good step for us. We got to remember that the public is important, and we always try to remember that. But the council had a couple of other questions too, and we're working on tweaking a couple of our goals. But I'll be bringing this back to the council on Tuesday, as you said, November 9th, hopefully for final approval after some discussion. There are 7 areas involved. It's quality of life, communications, administration, financial management, human resources, infrastructure, and economic development. So these are what we feel are the big headings. There's a total of about 20 goals, and we look forward to working on these in the next 3 years, hopefully.
All right. Strategic plan, business plan, a little bit different. Government is definitely different than general business, but do you know that? Where the similar? I'm just kind of curious. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, we have a lot of plans, and one of our goals is not to have them sitting on the shelf not being used. We want to put them into practice. But the biggest one that confuses people on the strategic plan thing is we also have a comprehensive plan.
All right, thanks, Steve, for that strategic plan update. Let's talk about remote participation. That's still a piece on our agenda?
Yeah, Tom, I think that this really appeared on the same agenda initially back in mid-September as the 3-year strategic plan. And again, we hit the pause button, got some good input from council. They like the idea of a pretty basic policy that would allow, on an ongoing basis, apart from COVID, that council members and others would be able to participate in council and committee meetings remotely. We've used Zoom pretty effectively during the pandemic, the last 18 months or so. But what about when COVID fades out? Isn't it a good thing to allow people, when they're on a business trip or they're on vacation or they're ill at home, to be part of our meetings? So the plan is basically, fashioned after one that Marathon City uses, I believe, and it's really pretty limited. It just basically says as long as you have a good connection, we can hear you and see you well in terms of audio, visual, from wherever you are, you've got good quality internet, that type of thing, that you can participate. And there were a couple of questions raised at the last council meeting, and I've addressed them. So it will be a pretty stripped down model here. I really expected when we started this, Tom, that the council was gonna have more concerns about doing this on a regular basis. But I think the experience we've had, and Ing, our technology director, has done a good job working with you and others, has been so positive. It's been pretty seamless that I don't think they have a lot of worries about it being problematic.
All right, so that does have to get council approval to continue, well, not, I should say continue, but doing remote, otherwise we really couldn't by state statute, is that right?
Well, yeah, we don't even allow this in our own policy. That's the thing, we're gonna be adopting a policy. And we have grace right now because COVID is still going on. Things have gotten better, cases have dropped in recent weeks, but once we come told out of COVID, the city attorney has basically advised me that we really shouldn't be doing this unless we have something in black and white on paper that gives us the authority and the parameters for allowing people to do this. So that's what we want to get in place.
Okay. Before COVID, did you guys use phone before doing this or not? Very little or not at all?
I've been here since 2011. We didn't do any Zoom. We may have had people on phone a couple of times if they couldn't be present, if we needed them there, maybe an attorney or something. But for the most part, especially in open session, Tom, you had to be present at the meeting. And the thought was, I come to the podium under public comment and I want to say something to Councilmember Wagner. Doggone it, I want him in the room. I don't want him on some screen. But I think that everybody's got used to Zoom. The world has kind of opened up that way, and it seems to be working.
Yeah, definitely has changed the way we all operate in the world today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you bet. Anyway, you mentioned public comment before we sign off. What do people need to do if they want to do public comment? Just so you can explain a little bit to the viewers.
Yeah, well, first of all, we always appreciate the heads up. I'll get calls from people and say, look, I want to say something at the next council meeting. It's good to know that they're going to do that. I'll give the council president a heads up and explain to them how it works. We give you 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, and it doesn't have to be about an item on the agenda. It can be about anything. Please realize when you do this that some people will stand there and wait for the answer from council. That's not how it works. They'll take it under advisement. Sometimes the council president will say, okay, we'll talk to the police chief and we'll get back to you, or whatever it is, but it's not going to be acted upon that night. We do ask when people come into the room that evening, Tom, that they sign up. There's a form you'll see right away so that we have an idea. The council president can be aware that, here are the 3 people who intend to speak. But even if you don't, even if you walk into the room at 5:59, when the council president says, does anybody want to speak in public comment, you can raise your hand, go to the podium, you have to give your name and address for the record, and then just share your concern.
Oh, it's easy as that. So you're all welcome to do that at the beginning of the meeting. You have 5 minutes, like Steve said, and it actually does make a difference. You have said that before. Council have said that. It's things that none of us may know about. So please don't be afraid, and seek one of us out before the meeting if you have questions. That's all you have to do. I'm in that little room. You can always seek me out as well. So
we get a lot of good comment and feedback on public comment. In fact, we get ideas from the public of things that they'd like to see us do or look at, and it's very helpful.
All right. Well, that is all we have for today. As of now, the agenda can change in the next 2 days, and we don't know it, but we have to produce this ahead of time so we can get that information. Majority of it, all of it that we've spoke about will be on the agenda for Tuesday night, November 9th, and please tune in or come by. We have plenty of room at the council chambers. Thanks, Steve, for doing this every 2 weeks. Appreciate it.
Always enjoy being with you, Tom.
Yep, it's a good chance to reconnect and talk about what happened and maybe recap stuff as well. As soon as we find out about when the public hearing for the budget, we'll let you know that as well. Maybe before this, probably before our next time. So I'll get something out to you on TV. Keep an eye out if you're TV viewers. I'll put it on a scroll. I'll put it on a slide. You'll find out. So thanks again for joining me and Steve Barr. Tom Lowe signing off for Council Preview.